The air stank of smoke and rusted metal. Ash drifted like dead snow through the ruins of the city, clinging to every surface and shadow. Jonas stepped over the charred remnants of a car, its frame twisted as if gripped by some colossal hand, and left to rot. His boots crunched glass with each step, and he kept his rifle slung low, finger near the trigger, though there hadn't been anything to shoot at in weeks. Nothing alive. Anyway, the buildings loomed like corpses, hollowed out, burned black, leaning with a groan of cracked steel and lost purpose. Somewhere above, the sky tried to be blue, but the smoke turned everything gray. Jonas barely noticed. The world had ended over a year ago, and he had learned to stop grieving when it became clear no one else was left to do it. He moved with the patience of a man who had only one job left: survive, eat, breathe, sleep if you can. Don't remember. Never remember. Memory was a worse predator than any scavenger with a knife. He stopped at the edge of a building that might have once been a hospital. The emergency sign had melted into the stone, unreadable now. The place had been picked over before. Bottles gone, machines smashed. But Jonas went inside anyway. Habit. Sometimes you found something others had missed. Inside, silence pressed against him. Light filtered through holes in the ceiling, illuminating floating dust. He passed broken beds, overturned gurneys, and walls painted with old panic, handprints, blood, sometimes both. It all felt like a dream trying to forget itself. He heard the sound then, faint, not the clatter of debris, not wind whistling through a broken window. This was softer, lighter, a whimper, maybe, or a cry. Jonas froze. He knelt behind an overturned reception desk, listening. There it was again, a small choke sound, childlike, coming from below. He didn't speak, didn't call out. That could get you killed, could be a trap, but instinct tugged at him, something old and human, something paternal, against every better judgment. He moved toward the stairwell that led down to the basement. It was colder there, the smell of mildew stronger, but also something else, something faintly metallic, tinged with ozone. He found a flashlight in his pack and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, revealing collapsed ceilings and cracked tile floors. The sound came again, closer now, definitely a child, but not quite. He turned the corner into a storage room and stopped cold. She was huddled in the far corner, barely a shape at first. Pale limbs wrapped around a small frame, long silvery white hair tangled and matted. Her skin glowed faintly under the flashlight, bluish, almost translucent, and her eyes, they were open, locked onto him, large, luminous, and glowing softly like stars submerged in water. Jonas lowered the light, but didn't move. She didn't either. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She looked no older than 10, though there was something ageless in her stillness. She wore what might have been a simple dress, torn and soiled. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She just stared wide-eyed and silent, like she wasn't sure he was real. "You hurt?" Jonas asked quietly. No answer, but her eyes flicked his hands, then to the weapon on his back. Jonas slowly crouched and placed the rifle on the floor in front of him, pushing it away. He raised his hands, palms up. "I'm not going to hurt you." Still no sound, but something shifted in her face, uncertainty replaced by something more curious. Jonas stayed kneeling, waiting. She moved cautiously, crawled forward a few feet, never breaking eye contact. Her fingers were long, too long, tipped in subtle claw-like nails. Her skin shimmered in the light like frost. She pointed to herself, then pressed both hands over her chest. Jonas tilted his head. "You got a name?" She opened her mouth, struggled, then closed it again. It was like speaking wasn't something she'd done in a long time. Maybe ever. "You understand me?" She nodded, barely perceptible. "All right." He looked around the ruined room. "You alone?" This time the answer came slower. Another nod, followed by something else. Her lips moved. A whisper. He leaned forward, straining to hear. "Gone," she said, almost inaudible. Jonas felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. "Your family." She nodded again, then looked down. Her tiny fingers clutched at her knees. She looked impossibly fragile. No one that small should have survived out here alone. Not in this world. And certainly not something not quite human. Jonas exhaled slowly, standing. He slung the rifle back and took a few careful steps forward. "Okay," he said. "Come with me. It's not safe here." She hesitated, then slowly stood. Her movement was oddly graceful, like she weighed nothing. When she stepped toward him, the light caught her eyes again, glowing, unblinking. Jonas turned and led her back up the stairs, checking every corner twice. At the surface, the ash had thickened. Wind picked up. A storm brewing, maybe. They'd need shelter. He led her through alleys and side streets until they reached a half-collapsed apartment building. He'd stayed there the week before. It was secure enough for the night. Inside, he gave her half a protein bar and a bottle of water. She took them with reverent silence, chewing slowly, sipping as if every drop might vanish. He sat across from her, studying her. "You're not from here," he said. She didn't answer. "You're not one of them, though, the ones who attacked." Her eyes darkened. She looked away. "No," she whispered. Jonas nodded. "Didn't think so." Silence hung between them. Outside, the wind howled low and sad through the empty streets. Finally, she looked up at him. Her voice barely carried across the room. "Will you protect me like my dad did?" The question hit like a punch to the chest. He didn't respond at first, because every word she said cracked something buried inside him. His daughter had been about her age. Dark hair, bright eyes, a laugh like sunlight. He hadn't saved her. He'd failed her in the worst way a father could. But this girl, whatever she was, had the same desperate, soul-deep need for safety. And he knew in that moment that he couldn't walk away from her. He met her eyes and nodded once. "Yeah," he said, "I will." She leaned forward then, barely, and placed her hand on his. Her skin was ice cold, but her touch was steady. Outside, the storm began. Inside, they sat in silence. The city might never heal. The world might never come back. But Jonas had made a promise. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, he felt something stir in the ruins of his heart. Hope. The fire crackled low. A tiny thing coaxed alive from broken furniture and the remains of old magazines. Its warmth did little against the night's chill, but it was enough. Jonas sat close, sharpening his knife on a rock, while the girl lay curled in a moth-eaten blanket nearby. She hadn't spoken again since asking her question. She didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer hollow. It was a shelter. He still didn't know her name. Jonas caught her watching him, eyes half-lidded but alert. He'd seen that look before in war zones. Children forced to grow up too fast, eyes older than their faces. But hers held something different. Not fear, not quite. More like quiet calculation, as if she were still deciding whether to trust him. "You've got a name?" he asked again, softer this time. She blinked slowly, then sat up. Her thin fingers pointed at her chest. "Lyra." Jonas repeated it aloud, trying the shape of it. It suited her, strange and quiet and somehow luminous. "Lyra, that's beautiful." She tilted her head, then nodded, as though confirming a translation. "Where are you from, Lyra?" She hesitated, hands folding into her lap. Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and she stared at the fire like it could erase the past. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely louder than the flame. "Not here. We came to help. They hurt us anyway." Jonas froze. His grip tightened on the knife. Aliens! That word had become poison. After the first ships arrived and the skies split open with fire, the world never recovered. Everyone blamed the invaders. But no one knew why they came or what they wanted, only that everything burned afterward. "People thought you were the enemy," he said. "We weren't," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked. Her skin was too perfect, untouched by sun or time, her hair unnaturally smooth. The glow of her eyes pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. She wasn't human, not fully, but she was no monster either. "My father tried to stop the others," Lyra continued. "He said Earth was sick, that you needed healing, not war. And what happened to him? Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she closed her eyes and laid her palm against her chest. He stayed behind, bought us time to escape. I ran. I didn't know where to go. Jonas stared into the fire. The guilt he'd buried so deep it felt like bone resurfaced, raw and immediate. Maybe they had never understood what really happened. Maybe no one tried to. Earth had already been on the edge. Plagues, floods, riots. The aliens had simply arrived at the wrong time, or perhaps the worst possible one. He rubbed his temples. How long have you been hiding? Lyra's answer was quiet. Since the sky cracked. He nodded. That matched what survivors called it. The day satellites fell, when the upper atmosphere lit up and half the world lost power. The sky cracking had become a scar in history. She shifted closer to fire, drawing the blanket tighter around her. Her voice was faint but clear. I watched them die. My friends, my people. Some burned. Some just stopped. My father said I was strong, that I'd survive. She paused, then looked at him directly. He told me someone would protect me. Someone like you. Jonas swallowed the lump in his throat. The pain in her words echoed his own too clearly. He had failed to protect his daughter when it counted. He hadn't even been there, in the final moments. Just static on a radio, and then silence. I'm not the man I used to be, he said. You might have made a mistake. No, she said with quiet certainty. You stayed. He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Instead, he busied himself checking supplies. Half a bottle of water, 2 protein bars, 3 rounds left in his sidearm, and a broken radio that hadn't worked in weeks. If they were going to move again, they'd need better gear and safer shelter. Tomorrow, he said, we find somewhere better. This building won't hold through another storm. Lyra nodded. I can help. He raised an eyebrow. How? She reached into the folds of the blanket and retrieved something wrapped in cloth. Unfolding it revealed a small, dull blue crystal. It pulsed faintly with light. It shows things, she said. Energy. Life. I can use it to see where's safe. Jonas leaned forward, studying the crystal. It looked inert like glass, but when Lyra touched it to the floor, the stone shimmered. Shapes glowed faintly, like outlines in another dimension, revealing a network of what might have been long-forgotten heat signatures beneath the building. He whistled low. Is that how you survived so long? She nodded. It doesn't last forever, but it helps. He looked at her, the crystal, then back at her again. You're full of surprises. She gave the faintest hint of a smile. The next day dawned dim and cold, filtered through storm clouds. Jonas led the way, rifle in hand, eyes scanning for danger. Lyra stayed close behind, the crystal tucked against her chest. They passed corpses in the street, buildings cracked like open ribs, and scavenger dens marked with crude symbols. Once, they spotted a figure in the distance, lean, fast-moving, armed. Jonas pulled Lyra behind cover. They held their breath until the man passed without noticing. Afterward, Lyra touched his arm. You're afraid, she said. He didn't deny it. You should be too. I am, but not of them. Jonas didn't ask what she meant. They reached an old municipal shelter buried beneath a collapsed subway entrance. It took an hour to pry open the rusted doors. Inside it was dark, stale, but intact. Cots lined the walls, and old supplies, food, blankets, lanterns, waited untouched. They made camp there. Jonas rigged a barricade at the door, and Lyra curled up on a cot, exhausted. He watched her sleep, wondering what kind of life she had known before this, wondering if she had ever been a child. He must have dozed off, because he woke to her voice murmuring in the dark. Jonas. He sat up. What is it? I had a memory, she said, of my father. Her tone was dreamy, far away. He was holding me. We were watching the stars from our ship. He said every star is a story waiting to be told. I asked him if humans had stories. He smiled and said, more than any race I've ever known. But the ones worth keeping are the ones where someone chooses to do the right thing when it costs the most. Jonas rubbed his eyes. Sounds like a good man. He was. They sat in silence, the weight of those words filling the space between them. Do you have memories like that? She asked softly. He hesitated. Then, I used to. A daughter. Dark hair. Wild spirit. She wanted to learn the names of all the birds. Told me I wasn't allowed to die until I could tell a hawk from a falcon. Lyra smiled barely. Did you? Eventually, he said, but not in time. She reached across the cot, touching his wrist. Her fingers were cold again, but her touch was steady. A hum filled the air, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to come from nowhere. Let me show you something, she whispered. And then he saw it, not with his eyes, but in his mind. A field of tall grass. A young girl laughing, chasing birds. The sun warm on his face. His daughter's voice echoing, whole and unbroken. He gasped and pulled away, breath catching in his throat. That was how. Memory, Lyra said. It echoes. I can find it. I can give it back. He stared at her, shaken. Why would you do that? Because you stayed, she said again. Because you chose to protect me. Jonas leaned back, heart pounding. Wind howled through the broken tunnels like a wounded animal, stirring echoes from years long gone. Dust danced in the flashlight beam as Jonas crept forward, his rifle raised, ears trained on the smallest sound. Behind him, Lyra moved silently, feet gliding rather than stepping, her glowing eyes illuminating the path ahead far better than his equipment. Her presence was beginning to feel like a second sense. He no longer had to look to know where she was. They'd stayed in the shelter for 3 days. Long enough to rest, heal, and plan, but not long enough to avoid notice. It started with distant noises, metal scraping, faint footsteps, whispers in the darkness. At first Jonas thought it was paranoia, but then the barricade had been tampered with. Someone had marked the outer wall with a red X, the kind raiders use to mark scavenged or claimed territory. It was time to move. Now they were cutting through the old subway lines, hoping to reach the signal tower to the north. If Lyra's crystal still had energy, it could amplify dormant frequencies, maybe even contact others. If anyone was left, Jonas glanced back at her. You sure this is the right way? She nodded without hesitation. The current here is cleaner. No static. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he trusted her senses more than his own. The crystal she carried had grown dimmer lately, but it still pulsed softly near danger. When it flickered, they stopped. When it glowed bright, they turned back. It had saved them more than once. They emerged from the tunnel into a collapsed maintenance station. Graffiti coated the walls, names, dates, threats in dozens of languages. A makeshift shrine stood in one corner. Candles melted into skeletal shapes around a pile of broken tech and bones. Lyra moved toward it, her face unreadable. This was a message, she said. Jonas approached cautiously. What kind of message? They believed something lived down here, something left behind, but they didn't understand it. He peered at the pile. Among the debris, something shimmered faintly. Another crystal, smaller, duller, cracked. He picked it up, and it flared for a brief moment before dimming again. Same as yours. Similar, but damaged, like a piece of someone else's memory. She reached out and brushed a fingertip against it. Her face twisted suddenly with pain, and she recoiled. Lyra? She shook her head, eyes wide. Fear. So much fear. They tried to speak, but no one listened. Jonas looked again at the shrine. How many had died trying to understand something they couldn't even name? How many warnings had humanity ignored? We need to keep moving. They left the station behind, descending deeper into the earth. The deeper they went, the more the world above seemed like a dream, distant, blurred, unreal. Down here, only shadows mattered. And echoes. Hours passed. Or maybe more. Time lost meaning in the dark. Then Lyra froze. Jonas stopped beside her, scanning the darkness. What is it? She didn't speak. Instead, she pointed. Ahead, faint and flickering, was light. Not fire. Not a flashlight. Something cold, blue, almost alive. They approached carefully, stepping over shattered tiles and rotted beams. The tunnel widened, and the walls became smoother, metal rather than stone. Strange markings lined the surface, patterns that shifted when viewed from the corner of the eye. Jonas felt it before he saw it. A hum in his bones. A low, resonant pressure. "This place," Lyra murmured. "It remembers." They stepped into a chamber unlike anything Jonas had seen. The walls pulsed gently like a heartbeat. In the center stood a tall structure, half machine, half organic. Twisting spires of crystal and alloy. It thrummed with power. Lyra dropped to her knees. Her breathing came shallow. "What is this?" "My people's last hope," she whispered. "A signal route. It was meant to reach across stars. To call for peace." Jonas stared, speechless. He'd fought in wars, seen weapons tear through armor like paper. But this was something older, something sacred, a relic from another time. Why didn't it work? They silenced it. "You're kind." Her voice wasn't angry, just resigned. They feared what they didn't understand. He knelt beside her. "Can we fix it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her crystal to the structure. A jolt surged through the room. Light exploded outward, symbols lighting up in cascading waves. The hum deepened, grew stronger. The air thickened. Then came the voices. Faint, fragmented. Not in English, not even in sound, but in meaning. Memories, emotions, pleas. A father's promise. A child's hope. A warning ignored. Jonas clutched his head, overwhelmed. The pain was sharp, but behind it, clarity. Lyra stood slowly, eyes glowing brighter than ever before. "They are still out there," she said. "Some of them, scattered, hiding, waiting. You can reach them? If the signal holds long enough." He looked at the machine. It was waking up, but barely. Sparks danced along its spires. Cracks glowed with unstable energy. "It's unstable. Can you stabilize it?" "I can try, but it will cost." "Cost what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped into the center of the spires. The machine responded immediately. Tendrils of light latching onto her, drawing energy from her form. She gasped but didn't cry out. "Lyra." She looked at him, smiling faintly. "You asked if I had a name, but names are more than words. My father gave me mine to carry hope, to remind others that even in ruin, light can still bloom." Jonas moved forward, but a wall of energy rose between them. The structure trembled. "Don't," she said. "You can't stop it, but you can protect what comes next." He slammed his fist against the barrier. "You don't have to do this." "I do," she whispered. "So no more children hide alone in rubble. So no more fathers die with silence in their ears." The machine roared to life. A beam of light shot upward, piercing rock and steel and sky. It reached beyond the clouds, beyond Earth, into the void. And then it went still. The light dimmed. The hum faded. Jonas rushed forward. Lyra collapsed into his arms. She was pale, too pale. Her glow had faded. "No, no, stay with me." Her hand brushed his face. Weak, gentle. "You stayed," she murmured. "I always will." Her eyes closed. And then, just as he thought she was gone, a flicker. The crystal at her chest pulsed once. Then again. Steady. She was breathing. Faint but alive. From the chamber walls, new sounds emerged, distant replies. Signals returned. Jonas held her close as the machine began to power down. He looked up, past the ceiling, through memory and ruin, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It had a name. And it was Lyra.